Hi, this is Chris Schroeder. Welcome back to the ACCO Legislative Update. Today we have Bill Case, the ACCO Legislative Liaison, joining us. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Chris.
We're going to give a little wrap-up of Session Day, some of maybe the highs, some of the lows, and a little bit of everything in between. This was definitely an interesting session, Bill. Why don't you give us a little overview from your perspective?
Yeah, Chris, you are correct. It was different from any other I've seen in forever. Lots of drama. Session was filled with a lot of drama this year, but it was productive. It was chaotic at times, but it kind of reminds me of the old saying that making laws is like making sausage. It's it's not pretty to watch, but at the end, sometimes it tastes pretty good. So, the House and Senate started off pretty much in drama, as I said earlier. What happened is that at the very beginning, the House had to censure a couple of its members, and the Senate was hurting from leadership elections that they had during the interim. So both sides had some drama going on just going into session at the beginning of session. And then education funding started. Education funding and tax cuts, that pretty much dominated the session. It just got to a point where the legislative process came to almost a standstill. The House had their agenda set, the Senate had their agenda set, and they were trading comments all during session, and legislation was slowly getting done, but then the governor decided that after watching this, he wanted to put in his 2 cents and come in and present his views on education reform and on also education funding and tax reform. And so when he put in his 2 cents, he kind of got ignored by the House and the Senate. That kind of angered the governor, and the governor decided, hey, I'm going to veto 25 bills to get their attention. So he vetoed 20 Senate bills and 5 House bills. And then that angered the Senate, and the Senate decided, okay, we're going to override these vetoes. Well, they took up 4 vetoes and they overrid them, but they need the House to respond as well, and the House didn't respond. So again, there you go. Process was shut down. Nothing moving. So now the governor and the House, they basically decide to kind of join forces and try to urge the Senate to come along, and that didn't work. So at the end of the day, I would say, to kind of wrap this up, the House and the Senate, they agreed. They put a budget together. They completed the process, but in the meantime, they created a special session, a concurrent special session that went along with the regular session. And when doing so, they did complete the budget during special session, and they also got some policy bills done during regular session. So it was a little confusing at the end, but at the end of the day, they got it all done. And at this point in time, the end of session, what we ended up with was a balanced budget. They did do some tax reform. They eliminated the franchise tax in the state. They also helped the people who are married and filing jointly their income tax. There's a bracket that's unfair to them because it's unfair to married couples, so they got rid of that as well. The House decided at the very end to join the Senate, and they overrode 19 of those 25 vetoes that happened, weeks before. So at the end of the day, we got done. However, at this moment, we're still in special session.
And while we're discussing special session, I know that can be very confusing for some. We have a regular session, and on top of that, they put a special session. Maybe explain briefly why they called a special session, the legislators.
Well, basically, the special session was called because they were running out of time. The clock was ticking, and they needed a little more time to spend the rest of the ARPA money, the American Rescue money that they got back in 2021. They needed to spend that. It was like $56 million, and they needed to complete their balanced budget. So they needed more time. So those are the two reasons why they had special session.
Okay, and now back to the budget a little bit. I know you hit on a few key points, but I did hear that this was the largest budget in state history, but maybe give us a few highlights from the state budget this year.
Well, some of the things that happened, you are correct, it was 12 point something billion dollar budget, so it was the largest we've ever had. Education getting the lion's share of it, they got probably like $5 billion of it or something like that. They got a large amount, but some of the things that has happened during this session and over time was trying to appropriate the American Rescue Funds. That was over $1 billion worth of revenue funds that needed to be placed into our Oklahoma economy. So sooner than later, you're going to start seeing, commissioners, you're going to start seeing the result of this $1 billion worth of funding coming into your communities. Also, the legislature, Chris, created what they call a legacy fund. This legacy fund is also money, I think it's $600 million that's going to be used for capital projects across the state as well. They put in some money in the budget, I think $10 million they put in the budget for disaster mitigation. Now, that's a matching fund for you commissioners that will allow you to access this money for your FEMA match, or also for maybe like when you have some disasters in your area for washed out bridges or roads or things. You'll be able to access this fund, and they put $10 million in it this year for that purpose. REAP got $30 million. You know, REAP comes through your COGS. You also got ad valorem reimbursement to your counties, $89 million. You also got, the legislature decided that they wanted to try something a little different. And the rural legislators pushed hard for this, but they put $200 million into a fund that's going to be administered by ODOT. Now, those $200 million are going to go for state rural roads. And those projects will only be in counties that are a population of 75,000 or less. And I don't recall the name of the program, but it's going to be coming your way in the near future. And then the last thing that they did was create I want to call it the County Community Safety Investment Fund. Now, what that is, that was created for the BOCC's benefit, so you can access grant money for mental health care and substance abuse health care in your communities. They put $12.5 million into that fund, and that county community fund will be accessed by grants through the Department of Mental Health, Substance Abuse.
All right, Bill, now let's touch on just a few bills. I know we've touched on a lot of the budget and a lot of the different funds that were created. Let's touch on a few bills that were kind of front and center as we went through session this year. First, let's talk about House Bill 1590. This was a big bill. I know we worked real hard on it. We had our commissioners really engaged. And this is a bill that provides more funding for 911 across the state and the 911 authority. Yes,
House Bill 1590, that was a big push this year, basically to implement next generation technology, next generation 911. It's been talked about for 20 years, Chris, and I think they finally got it across the finish line. We're going to see some reforms within our communities and to make the system better, and it is going to have a fee increase of 50 cents on our cell phones and other devices, but they're also getting rid of the fee on the landline. So the cost of the 50 cents will be much cheaper than what you've been paying for your landline percentage. So it's going to be a good thing, and it's going to take us into the future, and it's going to help out county 911 systems.
Yeah, no, that's a great bill. Also, I'll touch on real quickly the travel bill that increased the travel allowance for elected officials. That was Senate Bill 951. That's another bill that's been front and center. If you remember, it went through the House and Senate, really no issues, and kind of got caught up in the education plan funding and all that, and got caught up in the vetoes by the governor when he vetoed 20 or 30 bills. So we've been working the last month trying to get that overridden by the House and Senate. And fortunately for us, the last week of session, I think it was May 25th, the Senate overrode it that morning. We got it moved to the House that afternoon. But essentially it increased the travel allowance for all elected officials by $300 per office. So the $700 for sheriffs and county commissioners will now go to $1,000. And this bill also had emergency on it, so it took effect immediately. And I think the last thing to note on that bill, starting in 2028, there's an automatic 2% increase yearly. So that's going to be beneficial for us to not only keep up with inflation and price increases and vehicles and gas and maintenance and everything else, but it also stops us from having to go back to the legislature
That's correct.
To get that increase. So
that's important.
Yep. So that was a big win for counties. Next, let's touch on House Bill 1893, and this is the bill that increased the penalties on elected officials.
Yes, yes, this is an important bill. This bill, 1893, would allow for the county commissioners to be part of a list of elected officials that when assault or assault and battery is upon them by a citizen, then the enhancement of their crime, they'll be part of that statute. The crime right now is to penalize people that commit assault. It's $1,000 and also possibly 6 months in jail. The other part of it is if you commit assault and battery on a county official, then like a judge or whatever, you would also be committing a felony at that point and subject to a $5,000 fine. So enhanced penalties, the commissioners are now part of that list of elected officials. And we think this is a really good piece of legislation. And we're hoping next year that we're going to discuss further if we can include the county employees, because many times employees are out there on the work site, and some citizens get a little out of control, and we may be able to do something for the county employees next year, Chris.
Nope, I agree, and unfortunately that kind of thing's getting more common. The last bill I'll touch on real quick is House Bill 2538. This is a bill that allows counties and cities to form local government investment pools. Can be a little bit confusing, but essentially kind of think ACCO has an insurance pool. You could create a pool of counties and cities, and this would allow you to hire a professional to invest your funds and maybe get a better rate of return than you would in your local bank. So it's outside the box thinking. It's a good idea. A lot of other states are already doing this, and it's just going to be another tool for the counties in their tool belt. To kind of wrap things up, Bill, I'll leave it to you. I know we did a lot of outreach things this session, and just anything else you want to touch on to close it up, but I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, because of ACCO's leadership, we've got this outreach program that we do with the legislature. And I wanted to begin by saying thank you to the county commissioners. Thank you so much for being involved. When the director asked you to respond, you have, and it worked well this year. That's part of our outreach, is for you to respond to legislators and actually to talk to them from time to time. The other things that we did this year was participate in Transportation Day at the Capitol. We also made presentations with Randy Robinson at the Senate caucus. They have a Senate Rule Caucus and a House Rule Caucus, and we visited with both of those caucuses for quite some time. in front of a number of legislators, like 40 different legislators in the House side and probably about 25 in the Senate. So we had a really good session with both of them. Another feature that we do during session, Chris, is what we put together a legislation support card. This is a support card that we hand out to legislators to let them know what the county commissioners support. And it really is a helpful tool for a legislator at their desk when they're voting. And lastly, our breakfast. We have a weekly breakfast, Chris, that ACCO's created that is outreach to legislators. And this year we had 15 weeks legislative breakfast. We had 247 legislators, different participants, participate in attending our breakfast. And that is quite an achievement to have a number of folks showing up each week to take part in this outreach. And as always, we do not lobby the legislators during breakfast, but we do talk about county issues that are important to them. So with that, Chris, again, thank you, commissioners, for your support this year. I think overall we had a good year. We were not successful with getting additional county dollars for our county highway system for maintenance, but we do have legislators listening. So we'll continue to work on that. And again, thank you, commissioners, and thank you, Mr. Director.
Yeah, no, I think I've always said it, the commissioners, this is their association, they're the backbone, and their outreach has helped us tremendously. I know when the 911 bill was passed, Lance Terry, the director of 911 Authority, called, and he was straightforward that without the counties calling and the commissioners calling the House members, he didn't think that bill would have got through the House floor. So
that's correct.
As I always say, we can't stay silent. We got to stay engaged with our legislators. But again, thank you everyone for help this year. Thank you, Bill, once again.
You're quite welcome.
Continue to be a good team. And that's all we have this session. Thanks for watching the ACCO Legislative.